Hello, hello. So I actually wanted to record this video last week as sort of like the first week back into January and covering some topics that I think are extremely important for setting your company strategy and trajectory for what to do in 2018. But unfortunately, Jeff Sessions in all of his glory decided to throw a wrench in those gears. So I had to address that last week. And it turns out some things are really actually turned out pretty well on the Jeff Sessions route. So I don't need to cover that here. You can find that online, but it looks like we actually might get federal legality faster than we thought. Great news. So anyway, what I wanted to discuss today was corporate social responsibility, and specifically cannabis social responsibility, which is sort of a unique form of CSR. And also to announce that I've also recently joined, as of the end of November last year, Kind Colorado. And Kind Colorado works specifically with cannabis companies to help them define, implement, and execute on corporate social responsibilities strategies for the cannabis space, which they call cannabis social responsibility. And as you probably saw in just the leader to my video, most people don't really know what corporate social responsibility actually means. Like, it's an acronym that's spoken about often. People will recognize the acronym. There are roles at major corporations that are dedicated specifically to corporate social responsibility, even full departments. But most people just think, you know, donating money to charity. Like, you set up a foundation or you throw a big golf charity event and you give away a couple $1 million and yay, you're doing corporate social responsibility. But there's some missing elements to that understanding that I think, you know, when defined, people really start to understand what a true corporate social responsibility strategy looks like. And when you really understand the impact of these strategies on your business, you can see that this is actually a major profit center, not a place for you to just donate money away and write it off on taxes as a company. So how it becomes a major profit center, there's some nuance to, but before I get to that, let me at least just define corporate social responsibility in a number of ways so that we can get a full understanding of what I'm talking about. So looking through a bunch of different resources online, including Conscious Company Magazine, which is a great resource for corporate social responsibility information. And I'll drop that link in the comments here when I'm done. But looking through these different sites, I found a couple different explanations or definitions for corporate social responsibility, because I don't believe this has been truly standardized. And so I'm going to read you a couple of those definitions, and then we can discuss how I think this really ultimately gels together into one accessible understanding of CSR. One definition is corporate social responsibility is the continuing commitment by business to behave ethically and contribute to economic development while improving the quality of life of the workplace and their families, as well as the local community and society at large. Not just charity. This definition covers the topic of ethical business, economic development, considering the lives of employees, their families, the local community, and society at large. So there's a number of things that are being considered here, not just who's a nonprofit partner that we're going to contribute to. A more succinct and I think slightly different definition is corporate social responsibility is a concept whereby companies decide voluntarily to contribute to a better society and a cleaner environment. A concept whereby companies integrate social and environmental concerns into their business operations and in their interaction with their stakeholders on a voluntary basis. So this is a company making the choice to integrate different strategies into the business that result in cleaner environments and better societies, not just better profits. So that's a very important distinction to make. Cannabis social responsibility becomes an integral part of the wealth creation process, which, if managed properly, should enhance the competitiveness of business and maximize the value of wealth creation to society. So that really is more context to corporate social responsibility. But the idea is that you're not thinking of your business like our main metric is generating revenue and profits. That is a main metric, but you're bringing in these other metrics that you're going to be following. Those metrics are going to be, how are you contributing or giving back to the community that your business does business in? And I've got some good examples I can walk you through of businesses that are doing this well. It also, you're going to be following metrics for environmental and social impact. You know, so how much carbon footprint are you producing as a company? How are you able to showcase to other companies how to reduce their carbon footprint, and how are you engaging your industry and your community to do better environmental strategies to improve the community and the society. So these are things that you would be measuring just as long with your P&L. You'd be looking at your revenue and your profits, and that'd be one metric. And then the next metric would be how well are you improving the environment? How well are you impacting your community? And how well are you impacting the lives and employees that work with you? So a true corporate social responsibility takes all of those things into account, and uses all of those different factors to determine exactly how to improve the lives of their employees, improve the communities that they operate in, improve the environment, improve the planet. There are a lot of ways that they can pick and choose how to implement those strategies and where they're going to make that impact. But it's measuring that impact as important as profits and revenue. And that's something that a lot of companies aren't really doing very well, but there are some few choice examples that are. When you develop corporate social responsibility to fit these definitions, it requires working with the business plan and really integrating these concepts into the operations of the business. Again, if you're going to be following these metrics as a metric of success, you have to have them in your business plan. This can't be something that you just do because you know you need to, or like, oh wow, we do need to give back. That feels good. Let's I don't know, let's volunteer this week, or let's throw a fundraiser. Like, those are off-the-cuff, knee-jerk reactions to knowing that you should be giving back, but that's not actually integrated into the operations of your business. So this is business plan integrations. This is actually saying these things are as important to us as the money that we're going to make. And you have to be intentional about every aspect of the CSR and how it integrates into a specific company or industry to make an impact. The intentions behind it are as important as the execution. Again, this can't be like a knee-jerk reaction, or just like you get to the end of your year and you see that your tax burden is a little high. Hey, Richard. It's not about that. This is about really looking at it and saying this is going to be an intentional and voluntary decision made by our business to showcase what we care about and what our core ethos is and how we are going to improve the world. And when you do that right, I mean, imagine the competitive nature that you're going to generate in your industry. Imagine other businesses are like, shit, now we've got to step up to the plate because these guys are killing us. So in the cannabis space, there's some really interesting companies that are already doing this. I'm never short on wanting to throw praise at Bloom Farms out of California. And so when I was talking earlier about making sure that your business plan integrates into your corporate social responsibility intentions, Bloom Farms exemplifies, in my opinion, that business strategy across the board being important, and how they have been able to make an impact has been pretty incredible. So Bloom Farms makes a concentrate extract. They sell vaporizer pens, just like generally any other vape pen distributor, but they do a one-for-one system, very much like Tom's Shoes, where if you buy a Bloom Farms highlighter, they donate a meal to a local food bank. So Bloom Farms is based in the Bay Area of Northern California, but they also are selling their product all over California. So you can buy a Bloom Farms highlighter in LA. That's not going to donate a meal to where the headquarters of Bloom Farms is. It's actually going to donate a meal to the LA food bank. So they've integrated on a community level, saying anywhere that our pens are purchased, we're going to contribute back to the community that purchase occurred in. We're going to keep the money in that community, impacting that community, not just what we care about, but where that money came from. We're going to honor our customers and the community that is selling our product by donating that meal to that local food bank. And that is a very important distinction that a lot of people have not made when it comes to how they donate or how they give back. They actually chose to make that impact in the community that they operate in and in the communities that they're selling in. So this is very intentional thinking, very strategic thinking about how their give back plan is going to integrate. And the other thing that they do, and when I said earlier that you need to consider your employees as much as your community, their employees get paid time off to volunteer. Not just volunteer for the volunteerism that the headquarters or the main corporate entity wants them to do, but also any volunteerism they want to do. So they can go volunteer at the local food bank, which is what the company serves to do, is provide food to the food bank. But maybe there's a few employees who care more about giving back or volunteering at women's shelters or at addiction centers. They have the option to choose to go volunteer that, and they get paid by the company to do so. Imagine what impact that has on an employee and how proud it would make them to work for an organization that they know that organization not just gives back, but like pays them to do what they think they need to do for their community, pays them to give into something that they care about and that they're passionate about, whether or not it's the same as what the brand itself has chosen to do. So that's a really good example of how a cannabis brand has used corporate social responsibility in a very intentional and integrated way, and the impact it's having on their business is, I mean, they get more than their proportions worth of PR and praise due to this. And so now imagine being a competing vaporizer concentrate pen in that market, and knowing that the most talked about, the most praised vape pen out there is this company that's doing all this good. I mean, that's going to really compel you to want to do good if you even just want to compete in general, right? So there's some interesting stuff to look at when it comes to Bloom Farms. So when it comes to taking corporate social responsibility and integrating it, right, I can give you examples all day, but like there's some fundamentals that you need to understand, and there are some decisions and questions that you need to sort out. So if you start to build this strategy, or if you decide it's right for your business in 2018 to really give back, and I argue that shouldn't be really a question, then you need to know what you actually need to do step by step to make that happen. So determine the needs or the interests, right? This is understanding what the brand cares about, what the what the people who make up that brand either collectively care about, or what the owners and stakeholders of that brand care about, determining what ultimately matters to them, right? Bloom Farms chose hunger. They chose giving food back to the food bank. That was really important to Bloom Farms as both a brand and also as the key stakeholders of that organization. Sometimes that might be fighting public policy. I was working with a company called Token that was trying to implement blockchain currency payments within the cannabis space, and they specifically paid money to a lobbyist to help advance federal banking regulations so that the entire industry could benefit from federal banking, not just their company. So these types of decisions are decisions you make up front. What do we want to do? How do we want to give back? Is this going to be, are we fighting for medical advocacy? Are we fighting for public policy? Are we trying to provide social justice and equity to, minorities or women in the cannabis space? What is our cause, and what does our brand really align with? And decide what that's going to be. Once you've determined that need, then you need to start doing some community research. You need to understand the neighborhood organizations and the stakeholders and the nonprofits, the demographics and the sociographics of your community and your neighborhood, the history of your community and your neighborhood. That too will show you ways that you can plug in your actual cause and need to what the community is doing. Again, going back to Bloom Farms, you've got someone who's decided to give back to hunger and local area food banks. So they did their research in LA, they did their research in San Diego, they did their research in San Francisco. Who are these organizations who are going to join with cannabis? And once they've decided that this is an industry they're going to participate in or receive funds from, how can you integrate with them so that you are giving them what they need, not just what you think they need? Then you need to develop a list of all of that of the above and present it to the whole business. So, this isn't just doing the research. This is also, really collecting all that research into one place, all those ideas into one place, and getting buy-in from your entire company. Again, it's really important to ensure that the employees are engaged across the board on what this strategy means and that they take it to heart. Determine the ideal function. So you've got your need, you've got your community organizations, your neighborhoods, your stakeholders. What's the best way that you can function within your business to give back to those organizations or give back to those needs? So, that could be volunteer opportunities. It could be fundraising or donation drives, in-store drives that you could do, to raise money or to, get a collection of toys or food to donate. There's donations, there's sponsorships. So determine how best your company or your organization can function. If you're a dispensary or a vertically integrated producer who has a retail store, then maybe you need to think about ways that you can engage your customers in the store experience to help give back. If you're just a producer and you're providing those products, find a way that the overall revenue or function of your production can really help. Richard, that's a great idea. Corporate matching campaigns is another way that you can determine what that function looks like, but again, you need to really think about how you can integrate that into your business across the board. Let's not think about what is the cause that we can just throw something at. We don't want to be throwing money or singular, efforts at them. We want to really make sure that everybody's engaged across the board. Next thing is to contact the organizations on behalf of the company. So this is something Kind Colorado does a lot when it comes to this research and getting the stakeholder buy-ins. You need to ensure that the groups that you're trying to help, that the organizations you're trying to partner with, first and foremost are vetted for cannabis friendliness, like I mentioned before, that you understand their historic work with cannabis, if they've already been involved or if they've had any problems with working with cannabis so that you can address those. And then review that research with the key stakeholders from your community research. So key stakeholders can be major activists. They can be people who are running for public office or in public office. They could be heads of neighborhood organizations. You need to also make sure they're cool with this. I mean, there have been a number of issues that we've seen so far in the cannabis space where not having the buy-in of your community can cause you a hell of a lot of pain. Let's look at a really good example, and I'm not trying to bash anybody here, but Sweet Leaf is a dispensary chain here in Colorado that just recently went through a lot of hell. And really more their bud tenders than the corporate organization, although they're going through some pain as well. And the problem was an issue known as looping, which means that Colorado put a limit on how much a person can purchase at once, and it's an ounce of cannabis or a similar amount in concentrates and edibles to whatever that would be. And so they put that limit on it per purchase, and Sweet Leaf apparently had people coming in, buying, and then going out, putting their product in their car, coming back in, buying again, putting their product in the car. And it was so egregious that some of the bud tenders were even actually training their customers to do this process and know how to get away with it. Is the process illegal? There seems to be some gray area to this. Certainly there are a lot of questions about why and how this function should have or should not have been handled by the company policy. But what I'm talking about right now is community buy-in. The reason they got busted was because they were being turned into the Denver police by their neighbors. Their neighbors were seeing this looping happening, and they were calling up the Denver Police Department, not even the Marijuana Enforcement Division, but the straight up Denver City Police, and saying, we're witnessing looping. Like, we're watching this dispensary in our neighborhood constantly allowing people to come in and buy and buy and buy, and we think that's generating a black market or contributing to the black market. So here's a company that's operating in many different communities, and in those communities, their communities essentially turn them in. So that's not getting community buy-in. That's not ensuring that you are integrated into your community like a true stakeholder. The Church of Cannabis did another very public, terrible approach at essentially ignoring their community. And that was a huge problem. They had no authenticity when it came to getting community buy-in and operating with stakeholders to make sure that they're addressing their concerns. So, this is a very, very important step to work with these key stakeholders. This is why Kind Colorado does what they do, because working with them is an arduous process and it takes a lot of time. And then once you've got all that done, present, review, and plan. Educate your company and or your store leaders on the research that you've done. Prepare them to work with the key organizations in the marketplace. You need to get their buy-in to the social cause and the work, and identify the 1 to 3 best opportunities to engage in those things, and then build your strategy from there and your next steps. If you've got that done, if you do that research and you do the right work to get to this point, and you engage your employees and you engage your stakeholders and your leaders of your organization, and you do all that correctly, how you do it, the next steps, the tactics, getting people to actually execute is really actually the easy part. That's just making it part of the daily activity, because they will have that buy-in. That's going to be the why they wake up to come to work stuff. You can pay them umpteen dollars. It doesn't really matter. In fact, if you look at millennial generational research, you'll find that millennials are far more interested in providing and giving back than they are in getting a salary. And so you need to understand that once you've got their buy-in to this is why they're going to be happy to work for you. You can pay them all the money under the sun. That will never make them truly happy to work for you or truly loyal to you, because really that's just a numbers game. Someone else could offer them more money, and then they're just going to bounce and go do that, unless they really believe in what they're doing. And I've got some statistics there I can go through. But when this is done comprehensively and thoughtfully, you aren't just a company that gives money to a charity now yearly or holds a single event. Your company will be invested in the community authentically with the support of the community instead of the disdain like you did with Sweet Leaf. Your employees will be invested and engaged. They won't just see charity in the periphery. There are some organizations where employees are just seeing what their company is giving a year, and they're not actually engaged or participating in it. So that's something interesting to consider. They need to be choosing their own time to volunteer as well. Companies would do well to pay their employees to volunteer wherever they choose, not necessarily just for the organizations that you have as a brand chosen to give back to. Your customers are going to recognize that their money is going to something more than just a product, and they'll become more loyal to you. A really good example from a personal level is I pretty much only shop at 2 dispensaries in Colorado, Good Chemistry and Legal. And the reason I only shop at those 2 dispensaries is because they've matched quality and price with giving back and providing a really great community company. The Good Chemistry brand is one of my favorites. I was introduced to them early on when I joined the cannabis space, but I knew their background and their history, and it came from the Berkeley Patients Group and the AIDS epidemic of the 80s and 90s in the gay communities of California, and how cannabis was such a help for them. This honestly was how the entire medical marijuana movement became something real, was because of the suffering of the AIDS community, or the people suffering from AIDS in the gay community. And so Good Chemistry comes from that history. And then when they operated their business in Colorado, they chose right off the bat to ensure that they were giving back and collaborating with LGBTQ company or organizations, as well as medical relief organizations, and really doing their best to service that community specifically, because that's the history of the brand, that's the why, that's the everything that led Good Chemistry into the market. They weren't here just to make money. Their background was not just making money. And so they're an authentic brand. They grow good cannabis, and they keep their prices accessible, which is part of their brand ethos, to make sure that anybody can get access to medicine, whether they're a medicinal patient or a recreational customer, that there's going to be a blend of all of this, and they're here to provide good quality cannabis to people who need it for their lifestyle. That's the reason I go to them all the time. I won't go shop at the really big brands that don't really have a core ethos, because that core ethos keeps me loyal. It's why when I go to California, I'm always going to come back with the Bloom Farms pen, because what they do makes me a loyal customer. Legal is one of the only cannabis companies out there that has dual green certifications for how clean they operate as a company, their organic processes, the soils they use, the nutrients they use, and they care intensely on fair trade practices and organic practices in the cannabis space and promoting that. So, there's another really good reason for me to be loyal to that company. I know what their core ethos is, and it's woven into the fabric of every single part of their organization. Coincidentally, neither of those organizations see a lot of turnover, and the employee turnover is one of the factors that makes this a profit center, so keep that in mind. Whenever you're doing this right, your employee churn is going to reduce by 25 to 50%. That's just a general basis. If you look at Good Chemistry, you'll find that they have the least amount of hiring positions open, generally due to the fact that they have the least amount of turnover of any bud tender group I've ever seen. At the most entry level, they have the least amount of turnover as any other retailer. I mean, that's a really big deal, I think. When you reduce that employee churn, you're lessening retraining, you're lessening recruiting, risk of unhappy employees or toxic employees infecting the culture of the rest of them. So, whenever you have an employee engaged to a company that does this corporate social responsibility correctly, you're going to have them 2.8 times more likely to stay than a typical employee. And that's a really big deal, especially if you're the person who is in charge of having to find and retrain these people and deal with the lack of productivity that comes with that. So getting into the data, this is one of my favorite parts about it, and I appreciate you hanging in there up to this point. If you just skip to this point, then you're going to find out why this all really matters, right? When you're using CSR strategies correctly, it pays off, and there's a lot of data that is provided by Conscious Company magazine across many different industries, and collected all that data and did a number of different studies and reports, and this is what they came up with. And these are all very interesting data points. Millennials aren't motivated by money, but by making an impact. I mentioned this earlier. The actual percentage is that 88% of millennials feel their job is more fulfilling when they have the opportunity to make a positive impact. 53% of workers at large say it's important to their happiness. So even if you're dealing with boomers or Gen Xers, or even younger than millennials, what you're going to find is that in general, 53% of them are going to be, it's important to their happiness that their company has a corporate social responsibility. But millennials especially, and you're talking about the majority of the people who are going to be employed in the cannabis space, 88% more likely to work for a company that does this and will be happy at that company. That is a huge impact. 87% of global consumers believe that business needs to place at least equal weight on society's interest as the business interest. So now you're talking about the money that's going to be coming in your door, right? If 87% of global consumers think that that a company needs to place at least equal weight on social impact as they do with revenue and profit, that says something really strong about how the culture has shifted globally. That's going to be just as true in the US as it's going to be in Europe, but the point being here is that they want to see you not just making money. They want to see you making metrics in your business, integrating into your business strategy these things that really matter when it comes to social impact. 73% of consumers say that they would switch brands if a different brand of similar quality supported a good cause. Good Chemistry is not the most expensive dispensary out there. There are other dispensaries that are actually at the same price or slightly cheaper than Good Chemistry is. However, I will stay loyal to Good Chemistry because I know what they stand for, and those other companies that can undercut them do not. So, I'm one of that 73%. I choose my brands specifically by how they do this and how they do this well. So you got 73% of consumers that agree on that. Companies with highly engaged workforces outperform their peers by 147% in earnings per share. Highly engaged workforces meaning specifically your employees are integrated into the business. They're not just showing up for their shift and then leaving. They're coming to the company parties. They're there for presentations the company is giving. They're watching the videos your company is sharing. They are volunteering. They are integrating into giving back. They're doing everything they can to have more than just a job, right? And so when you've got a highly engaged workforce, an inspired workforce, and having a CSR strategy provides that for you, you're going to outperform other companies that you compete against by 147% across the board. That might be higher in cannabis than anywhere else because our consumers are a little bit more enlightened. In a review of over 200 studies, they all concur on some interesting points. 90% concluded that good environmental, social, and governance standards lower the cost of capital. 88% showed those standards resulted in better operational performance. So what that shows is that 90% of the conclusions of this found that when you have good environmental, social, and governance standards, it lowers the cost of capital. It means that the cost of your employees becomes drastically less, the cost of your expenses become drastically less, and you're going to be seeing a lot more revenue outpacing your expenses in that regard. It also showed that in 88% of them, those standards resulted in better operational performance across the board. Why that's the case is probably layers upon layers of reasons, but you're getting better performance, better revenue, and less expense whenever you're operating with a true corporate social responsibility strategy in place. A couple more to hit you, just two more. A sound corporate social responsibility management has the potential to increase revenue by 20% in company study. So that means if you take any company out there and you just compare the two of them, if one of them has a sound corporate social responsibility and the other one doesn't, this one will never perform as well as this one does. This one will always make 20% more money across the board, generalized, than this other company who does not have a sound corporate social responsibility strategy. So take any of your competition, look at their revenue, add 20% to that. That's what you are capable of making if you have this sound strategy and they don't. So this is a very interesting, competitive, and also profitable opportunity for you. The last thing, and I think this is probably one of the most important ones, employee productivity goes up drastically if your employees are engaged or inspired. So if you put out like a line of employee satisfaction, the furthest over here, right here, being dissatisfied completely, and the furthest over here being inspired, right? I probably have those switched. So dissatisfied, inspired, it's all mirror image, so it's really hard to do. On that spectrum, if you have dissatisfied employees, they achieve 77% productivity to their job. Satisfied employees will achieve 100% productivity. So that's the benchmark, is just merely satisfied. They'll come do their job at 100% and they'll leave, and that's fine. If you have engaged employees, so slightly above satisfied, 144% productivity. That means that they are almost 50% more productive than just merely satisfied employees, just being slightly more engaged. If they're inspired, they achieve 225% more productivity. That's more than double what just a general satisfied employee will produce for you. So if you can get inspired employees, and I'm talking about Good Chemistry's employees, I'm talking about Bloom Farms employees, I'm talking about Tom's employees and Patagonia's employees. When you have inspired employees, the productivity is off the charts. You can't even begin to approach that level of productivity unless you're actually implementing a sound corporate social responsibility strategy. Why does all that matter? Why does it all make sense? Why are you able to make more money? Why are they more productive? It's kind of simple, really, if you get down to the core of it, because you provided them a reason to care. The people who work for you, the people who shop for you or shop with you, the partners you do business with, the companies that you that are vendors of yours, every single one of those groups of people will care more. And if you care more, you put more money into things. You put more productivity into things. You think about things when you're at home, like an owner does. You have stake in what's going on. And you are going to evangelize that company anywhere you go. If I work for a company I don't really care about, I'm not going to talk about my work whenever I'm out in social circles. If I'm an inspired employee, I'm going to be only talking about stuff like that when I'm out in social circles. Maybe not only because I would annoy the shit out of my friends, but certainly even strangers, I would have that conversation with because I'd be so proud. And I would want to herald that message across the world so that the rest of these businesses stand up and do something good as well. I once had a customer back in Austin that decided to start giving back in a real way, and then spoke about it in one of their corporate networking events. And one of the companies afterwards came up to them and were like, we've wanted to give back, and we have been giving back for years, but we don't really like to talk about it, and we're interested in the fact that you did. And his response was, well, at first I didn't want to talk about it either. We didn't want it to sound like we were trying to be like, look at us, we're giving back, so we're obviously better. But they didn't want it to be gimmicky. But he said, when I really started stewing on it, what I found was just by talking about it, I'm getting other businesses to do it too. And they're seeing us as an example, whether it's for competition or they're just being inspired by how we're doing it, and they've never known how to pull this off, and what we had to say influenced them. For whatever reason, I decided that speaking about it was going to create more impact than not. And so now I speak about it everywhere. That's what is really important about a corporate social responsibility strategy. Not just your employees, not just the PR, not just the marketing. Everywhere, people are going to want to talk about the why, and the why is going to matter. So anyway, this is way longer than I needed it to be, certainly the longest of any of these videos. If you decide to sit through this whole thing, I really appreciate it, and you will definitely understand more about how a corporate social responsibility really truly integrates into your business, how to actually accomplish this job and this project, and also who to turn to if you need the help with doing that. So Kind Colorado specifically exists to help cannabis businesses accomplish this task, and takes the burden and the time off their shoulders so they don't have to do that community research, which is incredibly hard to do. And they don't have to do all the organizing. All they really have to do is point their employees and their corporate strategy in the right direction, and we can help them with that. But regardless, you should be able to understand step by step what you can do now as a business in the cannabis space or outside of the cannabis space, how you can integrate a corporate social responsibility into your business plan and make it effective, and in the end, make your company infinitely more profitable than you would have been without one. So if you have any more questions about this, if you want to bounce some ideas off me and say, hey, we've been trying this, it hasn't been working, what are your suggestions? Hit me up. I'm always here. I'm always happy to help. But in the meantime, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.